Is the party over? What on earth is going on with Nigel Farage?
For more than 20 years, Nigel Farage has been a political constant. Parties have collapsed around him, allies have come and gone, controversies have seemingly bounced off him, and yet somehow he always emerged with another pint, another camera crew, another political party, sometimes, back in the centre of our politics.
But this week, something does feel a bit different, wouldn't you say, Helen? The Reform UK leader is facing mounting questions over a £5 million donation from a crypto billionaire, Christopher Harwin, who's based in Thailand, a £270,000 payment for promoting a gold investment company. He did used to be a metals trader.
I'm not sure you need to promote gold, do you? Isn't that a surefire hit?
I understand that. In my cash for gold quest, I understand it's doing pretty well. And there are questions over his property portfolio. It turns out he owns 5 properties. And he's had a run of by-election disappointments. He's had 5 losses on the trot, having been trumpeted as a potential winner. So this has all raised doubts about whether Reform's local election surge and poll lead is actually translating into national power.
Normally, it feels like you can't move for Nigel Farage popping up saying things, but he's both not been very visible recently, and when he has said things, he's looked unusually rattled. He's snapped at interviewers, he's told journalists to back off with their questions, he said that some things are none of the public's business, which, is an interesting take. And it's definitely the case that there's rumours around Reform that actually the party members themselves aren't very happy with some of this absence of answers.
Today we're asking, is Nigel Farage's luck finally running out? And if so, what does this tell us about the difference between being an insurgent and being treated like a potential government or prime minister in waiting?
I should declare that I've only been in one room with him, and that was a pub that we both happened to be in called Speakers in Westminster once. But
did you
beyond
clink
that,
glasses?
we really didn't. We stayed. Well, certainly stayed quite in a different bit of the pub.
Kept a wary distance.
What about you? Have you ever been in the room with Mr. Farage?
He's a bit of a bogeyman because everyone's aware of him, but I know surprisingly few people who've shaking the guy's hand. But I have been in one room with him entirely by accident, and it was specifically a lift a few months ago, and I went to cover a press conference he was giving on scrapping the 2-child benefit cap. And I got stuck in the lift with Nigel and some of his entourage. It was quite a small lift, and let me tell you, his team really go for it on the Lynx Africa. So I was sort of blinded by the gases.
In a contained space?
In a contained space. And
I'm not sure how lawful
he was
that
quite,
is.
And also I was wearing a huge backpack. So every time I turned to try and press
the button... And
button...
you're not a small person, I should just say.
sort of batted one of them. So it probably wasn't my finest hour. And they probably thought, who on earth is this... this tourist probably. They didn't know they were in the presence of a huge celebrity.
Of a podcast host.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and then he went on to talk about the 2-child benefit cap. And this is just to contextualise this a little bit, this is any Conservatives coming on board. This is very much Reform in their heyday, riding high last summer when they were doing these kind of interesting press conferences all the time. So quite different feeling to a year ago, because he was even in this very small lift, he was quite a big figure. Although I did dwarf him. I want everyone to know, both intellectually and physically. But he cuts quite a different figure, exactly as you say, just at the moment. He seems a bit rattled. He seems a bit on the ropes. And I think what we really want to talk about today is, what does that mean going forward for Reform? They've been riding high in the polls. It was only 6 weeks ago that we were all talking about their huge May election win. And yet here we are feeling like they've hit the buffers.
So before we get further into that, we'd love it if you followed us on Instagram, where you can find all the best clips of the show. You can find us at intheroom.pod.
You can also watch us on YouTube. Our channel is called In the Room Politics.
And if you've got a burning question, or you just want to send us some fan mail, you can email us on intheroom@independent.co.uk. So yeah, it is looking a bit troubling this week, but we've got to remember that Nigel Farage has survived more near-death experiences than most people in modern politics.
Literally. He's been in a plane crash, has he not?
Oh, that was during the referendum? Or UKIP? maybe UKIP, 2015 UKIP campaign.
Well, this is actually a really interesting point. It is hard to pinpoint which sort of uniform he was wearing at any given time, because he has come and gone from UKIP, the Brexit Party. During the referendum, it was Leave.eu, and now Reform. He is this kind of comeback kid. So I think one of the things I do want listeners and viewers to keep in mind is that even if things are looking a bit ropey for him now, this is kind of classic part of his cycle of peaks and troughs where, who knows, it is entirely possible he could just leave Reform for a bit and then come back in a year. He has a habit. I think he's done that 7 or 8 times.
That's been his playbook, isn't it? He sort of kind of gets fed up, strops off, comes back, reinvents himself, sometimes with a new party, sometimes not with a new party. Pretty much same old politics, though. Yes,
although this is the first time he's done it with a seat in the House of Commons. So he's the MP for Clacton. And I think what he is realising is that with great power comes great scrutiny. So now he's in the Commons, people are paying quite a lot of attention to particularly his income. It was only in 2017 that he publicly declared that he was skint. He's not that now, that's for sure. So he was being propped up by Aaron Banks at the time. He was a very prominent donor to UKIP and Leave.eu. And now he has had this £5 million donation from Christopher Harborne. He has got, I think, maybe £80,000 that has come in from his cameo appearances. We talked about that a little while ago. He has his GB News slot salary. He has his MP salary, which is £98,000 a year. And he has this £270,000 that has come in from gold bullion, which has a great piratey vibe to it. So, yeah, he's declared something like £2 million income as a sitting MP. I think one of the interesting problems for Farage now is that, you and I have experience of working with a politician who is described as Teflon. We had that with Boris Johnson, and there is well-documented information about his financial arrangements and money he was accepting and receiving, either in cash or donations in kind. And Nigel Farage is now under this particular media glare. And for some people, there will be a sense that it doesn't really matter. He is not a hypocrite. He doesn't go after other people for their income. And that was some of the criticism of Keir Starmer, that in accepting suits and glasses and so on from Lord Ali, having been so aggressive towards Boris Johnson, his predecessor, that it was some of that kind of hubris playback. People are quite divided. People either think, I don't really care. This is all factored in. It's priced in with Nigel Farage. Of course, he was going to get money one way or another. It's not important to me. They're all at it. And on the other hand, people think, this just feels wrong. Is he going to start asking questions about crypto? Is he going to be making decisions about, gold or indeed property in Kent? Because it turns out he owns 5 houses and has only declared for 2 of them, I think.
So we should be, not just so the independence lawyers can sleep easy in their beds at night, we should be clear that nothing, there's no accusation here that he's done anything technically wrong.
Yes.
So the question is, during one of these interesting lulls in Mr Farage's decisions about whether he wanted to be an MP, whether he wanted to do anything else, he accepted this £5 million. Technically, the argument is that he didn't need to declare it, and that's certainly what Reform have been doing in the defence of the decisions so far. The question is that actually he is now being investigated by the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner. The outcome of that investigation is also not known yet. The way that he has responded to this scrutiny and criticism is very thin-skinned, quite fragile. He's changed his story a few times about what he's done with the money, why he needed it. It started off being about security, but then he's also said he couldn't do some events because he can't pay for security. There's this very large property portfolio that's come from seemingly nowhere. It's murky at best.
And he also said he was gifted it as a reward for Brexit. Well, I didn't get £5 million, I can tell you. Arguably, I was less instrumental than him. But you're right.
Be careful what you claim credit for.
Yeah, quite. But also, you're right in that some of these defences, though, it's not just that the story changes, it's how you do it. And he's lost some of that kind of charm or roguishness that people think, oh, yeah, there's a sort of humour to it, whereas he seems genuinely quite agitated and cross. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about is, obviously, you were Deputy Cabinet Secretary, so you dealt much more with donations and expenses and so on from the government side, with ministers and so on. What are the worst possible scenarios for Nigel Farage in this kind of investigation? Is it possible he could be on his way out and there could be a by-election in Clacton?
I think that's really quite unlikely. And you're absolutely right to remind us all that there's a difference between the rules as they apply to government ministers and as they apply to MPs. And if you're a government minister and an MP, which is most of them, you have to bear in mind both of these rules. So the facts are that actually, if you're an MP, as long as you declare your outside earnings, then sort of it's up to you. And the idea is that the accountability comes from, you have to declare it. And if you're happy to stand up and say, yes, I've done that, so what of it? If you get over £300 from a single source within 28 days, that's what you need to declare. You declare it in your register of interests. It's quite common for people with the best of intents or not even reading anything into their intents to get this wrong. There's been various things where, like, exactly what is the value? Is it £300 if I took tickets to this thing and they were face value of £250, but I also got a pizza and some... People do trip up over this, and you are going to be very heavily scrutinised. So I think the really interesting thing, and this is perhaps what is happening to Nigel Farage now, is that for most of the time, for most MPs, it doesn't really matter. No one's really paying attention. It's up to you. If you haven't fully declared something, provided you're not, like, right in the white heat of scrutiny, you're probably going to get away with it. And what's different from what seems to really change for Nigel Farage is that he's lived this kind of outsider, maverick, anti-establishment, underdog, campaigning, good soldier, I'm just one of you kind of personas for such a long time. And then now, because Reform are doing so well in the polls and they seem to be treated in a slightly different way, he hasn't caught up with the fact that actually he now is going to get looked at and people are going to ask questions and demand answers, and it's all quite different. So to your question about what could happen, well, the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner will decide whether he's done anything wrong or not. My guess is he wasn't in Parliament, so it's arguable that he should have declared it. So I'd be really surprised if the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner does more than kind of potentially a little rap on the wrists or maybe you should have next time think about this or that or whatever, or think about the perception or something like that. But that isn't going to mean him losing his seat. I think there is a question for some of these kind of more contested people that at some point they might get a recall petition. So you don't need a very large number of voters in a constituency. This was an innovation under the coalition government that you can, as constituents, if you're really fed up with your MP, you can petition to have them recalled to the seat and basically run that election again.
I think that's 10,000 people.
Which is a small number of people in the scheme of things. But when we were talking about this earlier, you said that you thought it was really unlikely that any of the main parties would actually, even if, it's better to have Nigel Farage there with this kind of odour around him than to actually try and get him deselected.
Yeah, so it's actually perfectly straightforward to rally enough people, I think, to sign a recall petition. Or indeed, this Parliamentary Standards Commissioner might say you are suspended for more than 10 days, in which case that automatically triggers a by-election. The question is for the other parties is, do you really want to have a by-election? It's all about Nigel Farage on his home ground. We've been talking a bit about how it feels like Reform have hit the buffers. This could be the sort of galvanising force, a campaign that's all about him for 6 weeks. How wonderfully self-indulgent. Who do you put up against him? It really is like taking the battle to him.
So what do you reckon? Is Nigel Farage so Teflon after all?
I've been looking at a lot of the comments about this under articles and what people are saying online. And the internet is not the country.
I've told you so many times to not read comments.
I've got to get at that comment section. Interestingly, I think he's never set himself up to be a sort of Christ-like figure and to be pure and that he would never accept money and that kind of thing. I think a lot of this is factored in. And I remember this with Boris Johnson. People don't mind it so much, so long as there is not a perception of dishonesty. And I think that's where he has to be very careful. Get your story straight, and then I think people can just decide for themselves whether they believe you or not. The challenge, I think, is that the other political parties get very overexcited that Teflon Farage is not so Teflon after all, and this is all sticking to him, and they think that's good news for them. The reason he still has support is because people are fed up with how things are going in their lives and across the country. And that's what actually needs addressing. And my fear for all these big figures, £5 million, £270,000, all that flying around, is that the other political parties, and particularly the government, aren't actually getting the job done and getting change that people want. And so long as that is not happening, people don't really care, I think, about Farage's personal finances.
But these are huge sums of money. Doesn't it make him sound like entirely out of touch?
I think that in a way the numbers are so big that, there will be people who think, yes, I don't like this, it sounds unfair, it sounds murky and I don't understand it, and it just doesn't sound right, and it so dwarfs his parliamentary salary. On the other hand, I think these numbers are so big and so nebulous, and there's a sense that everybody's at it because there are many wealthy MPs in Parliament and there's always something coming out about someone's expenses because, as you say, it's easy to make mistakes. I just wonder whether it's priced in and as much as it is bad for him, and his specific things are crypto and gold, which all feels a bit dodgy in Cameo and that kind of thing. Putting that element of it aside, I think people just think it's all part of the same Westminster problem, and he's one of those creatures, which is bad for him. It's not the money and the expenses, it's that he looks like an insider. He doesn't look like an insurgent anymore that can bring change.
Isn't it also bad, though, that he looks like he can't handle the criticism and he can't handle the scrutiny and he's very thin-skinned? That I think has come across quite a lot, that he's, for someone who likes to have a go at everyone, he seems remarkably thin-skinned about himself. Like, he's not, he's just hiding at the moment. He didn't show up at the Spectator party. He hasn't been around and about in Westminster. They're kind of like Farage high on his horse, going around telling everybody else what to do, has been noticeably absent in the last few weeks.
Yeah, and long may that last on a personal level. But I think it depends how much attention you pay to this. I think lots of people won't have noticed, and Reform are still merrily putting out videos featuring him and him attacking Andy Burnham and him attacking Kemi Badenoch and, essentially him doing the same old stuff. I think that, losing some of that charm is a problem, but I do wonder whether a lot of this is Westminster getting quite overexcited. Nigel Farage, he's going to be the next Prime Minister. No, he isn't. He's actually just like the rest of them and he's on the way out and he's in a massive amount of trouble here. I think things will probably just ride quite steadily for a while. We're picking up on things that perhaps people across the country aren't, because Westminster can just be a bit more sensitive. And you are right, compared to a year ago, when the sort of summer party circuit was jam-packed with Reform people being incredibly overexcited, that's calmed down a bit.
Do you not think there is a thing here where part of Nigel Farage's problem, and maybe part of Reform's problem, is they haven't kind of caught up with their own popularity yet? So that they still see themselves like these scrappy underdogs, and they haven't quite got the reality that people are now seeing them differently. Once you start to lead the polls, once you do get kind of shoved into a different level in terms of what people expect of you, if they start to think, actually, these people might be serious and might be involved in the next government and all of these things that Reform have been telling everyone. So now they've kind of moved into a different level and they haven't quite internalised that yet.
Yes, I've got two thoughts on this. So there was a very interesting YouGov poll out this week that said that 61% of Britons now see Reform UK as a, quote, main party, which is up from 19% 2 years ago. So it's a big step change in they are a main player. It's obviously very hard to argue yourself as an insurgent if 2/3 of the public now see you as one of the main parties. It's a similar challenge. I don't think we should conflate the two people, but Andy Burnham has got this slight problem of coming in as I don't know if outsider is the right word because he has spent so much time in Westminster previously, but as quite an independent looking figure and as someone fresh and new. And then he's literally about to become the establishment. So put a pin in that for now, for future episodes. I think the problem for Reform is, you're right. I mean, they're leading the polls, but they are yet to win a by-election, pending one in Clacton, obviously. But I think that speaks to their organisation. So we've obviously been speaking about Nigel Farage and his finances and how he has declared or misdeclared expenses. But I think so much of this boils down to how Reform itself as an organisation runs. They've taken on a load of what I would call Tory dross, which is former Conservative
technical
minister.
term.
Yeah, yeah. See it out there. You be like Boris Wave, Tory dross. We're going to get hats made. And he's changing his team quite a lot. So Lee Anderson is now the chairman. David Bull has gone. I've seen they're doing a smattering of hires on their policy teams and on their comms teams and stuff like that. But they are not running themselves that well as campaigners, because some of these by-elections they really ought to have won and they didn't. Similarly, they should know how to declare things. So this is basic stuff, but you should have a few people in there who have got some actual political experience. And I mean the practical stuff. Things like declaring your expenses properly in Parliament.
There's a lot of former Conservative MPs in Reform.
Many of whom have been through the ringer on their expenses, so should have been able to advise accordingly, and they haven't. And sometimes that does show a bit of a misstep between here we are, we're a campaigning organisation, we're outsiders, and we're bringing the change you want. But the rubber hits the road eventually, and they are not actually, I think, running themselves brilliantly as a campaigning machine, because although they're doing well in the polls, that is not translating into seats. And they're also not quite getting it right on the kind of small p political parliamentary stuff, for example, where he should just be declaring this stuff properly. It's not difficult. Everyone is learning about it. Why turn it into this expose?
It's odd, isn't it? Because it would be much more on brand for him to have, or previous brand anyway, for him to have just owned it and said, so what? It's the sort of ducking and hiding bit that I think feels particularly problematic. The
interesting mistake that Farage has been making in the last few weeks, exactly as you said earlier, is he can't quite make up his mind on, for example, why he got this £5 million donation from Christopher Harborne. Was it for his private security? Was it a gift for getting Brexit done? Was it just a load of money and he wasn't going to become an MP, but he did own a controlling stake in Reform UK at the time? Who knows? But you just think, why wouldn't you, for the rules and the legal bit, be totally clear, and then also have your communication straight? And that's what he's good at. He's good at like getting a message and hammering it. Except when it comes to him, it turns out.
Because sometimes, actually, then this might sound odd, the answer is to over-declare even if you don't have to, because you look better in a sense, because you're just owning your own decision-making. So tactically, coming across as thin-skinned, I think, is problematic. So Farage's real problem, though, isn't this scandal. It's that Reform are finding out the difference between protest and power. Do you think he's still going to be the leader of Reform in a year's time?
Oh, good question. I mean,
put you on the spot there, Watson. Come on.
Using the last 20 years as basic data points, quite possibly not, because this is something he likes to do. He likes to come and go, announce he's leaving, and then be like, only kidding. He's like Serena Williams coming back to Wimbledon.
Which is a great thing, by the way.
Which is a great thing, yeah, sorry.
Take her name out of your mouth.
Sorry, Ms. Williams. It's a really good question. Someone said to me the other day, it's very chaotic internally at Reform. You've got these old Conservatives that will come on. Do you remember Zia Youssef left last year and then came back a couple of days later?
They're very emotional, aren't they?
They're very emotional. All that is to say that from the outside anyway, that all looks very chaotic. Who would want to be part of that? But my impression is that Nigel Farage really thrives off that kind of chaos. He likes people fighting with each other internally.
I'm only smiling because I'd love to know which is this organised political party that everyone's comparing that to.
It was ever thus. But some people hate it and he seems to really like it. There's a strong possibility that, the reason he is basically coining it with these various donations. He's in the Midas touch, as people say. He's getting all this money and it's because he wants to go away and spend it for a while. Of course, what people forget with the Midas touch, the story is actually quite dark, and he ends up sad and alone because literally everything, including his wife and children, turn to gold when he touches them. Just a little fable there for Nigel to keep in mind. In terms of whether I think he's going to be leader in a year or so, there's been this persistent rumour that he doesn't really want to be Prime Minister, that he wants to crush the Conservative Party because he hates them. I'd say the feeling is mutual. And that he essentially it models a lot of his thinking off the Reform Party in Canada, which eventually achieved great electoral success. But the original leader did not become Prime Minister. He did not end up leading the party to that success. He got it going. Nigel Farage is 62. He seems, perfectly content with his life. But if he was claiming to be skint less than 10 years ago, you can see a scenario where he's quite happily building himself a war chest to either, go off to Spain and have a nice life, or he is going to do this properly. And with him, you never know. Nigel Farage has this snake-like ability to keep shedding his skin, essentially. And he gets tired almost of the kind of latest iteration he's in, whether that's UKIP, whether that's Leave.eu, whether that's Brexit Party, whether that's Reform. And he kind of shrugs it off and he disappears and he says, I'm going away. And then he sort of regenerates and he comes back a year or so later and says, it's me, I'm back. I've got great new skin. I've got great new skin. And then again, it feels like the wheels come off, things get tired. He gets sick of the people he's working with and it's time to go. And I wonder whether we are in one of his skin cycles. And the word is that he's been having a lot of meetings on how does the Cabinet Office work? How does the state actually run?
Maybe it's that's broken him.
Yeah, and it's possible you just
not going near any of that.
Oh my God, that sounds absolutely...
Sounds terrible.
It's possible, but I think this also gets to one of my central arguments that I like to bring up a lot. We talk about leaders all the time, but the team around them is so important. He's got some interesting policy people and comms people, I'm sure. I hope he's getting a few better kind of practical people on the ground to keep his machine running. But he has also got, Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman and Danny Kruger. And those people, for better or for worse, have experienced government. I wouldn't say they've done an amazing job, but obviously I was with them, so I'm going to have to... can take some of the rap myself for that too. But he must be looking around and thinking, which of these people is capable of taking this on after me? Who do I have confidence in to do a good job here? Who in this team, because it can't be me by myself, is competent and able to, from day one, put our 100-day plan in place and 1,000-day plan in place. And they need to have some pretty serious hires and arguably fires. There's also something I would like to point to and just, we talked about his money situation and that kind of financial scrutiny. We've talked about him as a communicator and whether he's even likely to stick around just for his own personal wants. I do also think he's made a few strategic mistakes recently. I personally think it was a mistake to take on some of the, quote, Tory dross. It's actually worked out really well for Kemi Badenoch. That moment when Robert Jenrick defected, there'd been big questions about her leadership up until then, and suddenly the entire Conservative parliamentary party has coalesced around her.
That's right. I hadn't put that together before. You're absolutely right.
Because she also had this, I don't know if people remember, she did this kind of amazing expose.
She did, it was very dramatic.
Yeah, where she was like, I see you, Robert. And so he did not get to have the kind of glorious defection, that the surprise defection
anyway. Or because
anyway.
some poor soul had left something on a photocopier.
Yeah, they left his resignation letter on a
Why were they photocopying it, the more I think about that? Hold on.
Her spidey senses are tingling, everyone.
Yeah. Not a credible story.
So I think I see why he was saying, I want to take on some people with government experience. That's the big criticism that Reform were facing at the time, was that they didn't have enough government experience. I just think they were hiring the wrong people, personally. No offence, Robert Jenrick, although a bit. Secondly, I think some of his rhetoric recently has been a mistake. I think the pure cold rage comments that people remember is dangerous for Farage. He has a very specific line he doesn't want to cross, which is where he thinks he stands differently to, say, Tommy Robinson. And I think that his comments could be perceived as asking people to go a step further, physically a step further, than being a keyboard warrior or being angry about something. It's dangerous stuff. Just a side note, I think one of the interesting changes he has made is that normally the summer is when politicians kind of pack up and go away for the holidays. The last 2 summers, Reform have dominated the agenda. They had these big press conferences, if you remember. The government was putting out the odd press release on sort of planning or environment. And meanwhile, journalists were flocking to different parts of the country to see Nigel Farage unveil his latest innovation. He has been way ahead of the government, way ahead of the other political parties on essentially the mood of the public. And I think he got it wrong in the last couple of months. I also think they were wrong not to stamp down on the sexist comments from the by-election candidate in Makerfield. It's not just that Andy Burnham ended up having lots of women vote for him then. Rupert Lowe's work at Restore on the rape gang inquiry, for example, has been very powerful with women on Facebook, for example. You can see these groups where women are talking to each other. And I think that reform come off as laddier and misogynistic, essentially. And I'm not sure they've clocked that in time, and they should have just squashed that immediately. And the other thing is this is a straightforward policy question, really, but I think their plans to deny indefinite leave to remain for people who've been here for decades, contributing to public services through their taxes and actually working in public services, we're talking about nurses and carers and stuff like that, was a mistake. You only have to look to the response to the Windrush scandal in 2017 when we were both in government to know actually the British public hold fairness very strongly in their hearts, and they just got that wrong. It's very hard to shout the kind of patriotic fairness, we're proud to be British sort of slogans and then look like you're having a witch hunt. There's a few actual mistakes that they're now having to make up for. The only thing I would say, contrary to that, is it's quite likely Reform will dip in the polls. They'll probably be overtaken by Labour, maybe even the Conservatives. It's narrowing all the time. This will trigger a great amount of navel-gazing in Westminster with people thinking, oh, actually they're done. We were saying, obviously, 6 months ago, Nigel Farage is going to be Prime Minister, but I've forgotten that tweet. Don't show it to me again. And Reform are done, Farage is done. I don't think if you're trying to make the case that you're an insurgent party, it's the worst thing in the world at this stage in the kind of electoral cycle to dip and then to try and have a resurgence after the summer. You don't want to be leading all the time, particularly because they need to get their head straight because their poll lead is not translating into seats. I don't think there's talk of Reform being in trouble, Farage being in trouble. With timing in mind, I think it's unlikely Andy Burnham goes for this early election that people are talking about. I think it would be madness, but that's my view.
What would your advice to Andy Burnham and Kemi Badenoch be about how to handle both the dip and where the absent Nigel Farage now? We
are in a weird situation where basically all the political parties this summer need a revival. Andy Burnham's coming in as a fresh leader, so he will want to have a big poll bounce with Labour. Kemi Badenoch is being talked up as a very popular leader, but it's not quite translating into polls yet, so she needs to show she can lift the Conservatives up. As we've just been discussing at length, Reform could be in some trouble and they will want to show they haven't kind of hit the buffers and are slowing down. I have no idea where the Lib Dems are. In fact, I think Andy Burnham coming in is very, very bad news for Ed Davey, and I think we could see a potential leadership contest in the Lib Dems because they need someone who isn't just going to get them eaten up by the Labour Party. And same goes for Zach Polanski and the Greens. They've been very quiet recently, and in fact we've seen his personal approval ratings tanking. So we're in an interesting situation where 5 main parties, this is including SNP and Plaid, are fighting to kind of renew themselves and to represent themselves to the public. I think Andy Burnham and Kemi Badenoch have slightly different problems with Nigel Farage. Burnham is the big player in this because, as we discussed on Tuesday, Kemi Badenoch and Reform, they are struggling to work out quite how to play Burnham at the moment. Do they paint him as more of the same because he worked for Brown and he's a Blairite and a Corbynite and all the rest of it?
Or a dangerous socialist?
Or a dangerous socialist. I mean, it's quite hard. As Nigel Farage is discovering, it's very hard to have both. He can set the stage for how lots of this stuff is seen, not least because he is going to be our Prime Minister. Kemi Badenoch just essentially needs to keep doing what she's doing. It's a bit of a head scratch on the Conservative Party in general. I personally would have a big reshuffle. I think she's got some quite weak people in key positions. No one knows who they are. Don't give the public time to get to know who they are. Just put in really good people now to give the kind of fresh new people an opportunity to have 2 years in post before an election. I would be thinking where Farage is getting it wrong. The sexism stuff is a really good example. The fairness stuff is a really good example. You can make those kind of core Conservative values alongside their work on the economy. For Andy Burnham, I think he can do a better job of fighting Farage than Keir Starmer did, just because he can speak more directly, he can speak more plainly. He's a better communicator. I think it is a mistake to constantly go after Farage's financial affairs and scandals. And the reason I say that is because it's not that I don't think he should be scrutinised. The media should do that, and they should have a really powerful outrider, like an Angela Rayner style person who's just bashing him every day. But I think if Andy Burnham is using the precious time that he has to speak to the country, talking about what a bad man Nigel Farage is, it misses the point of why Farage is popular at all. He needs to crack on with his own agenda, lifting living standards, rebalancing wealth as he would see it, getting on with his day job, protecting the country, etc. I think it is falling into a trap to go after Farage personally.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because we saw this week from Andy Burnham him going much, much closer to the kind of language that's been used on migration and particularly exporting criminals than we've seen from the Labour Party full stop in a long time. So there was a tweet about a criminal that should have been extradited that hasn't been. And it was interesting because Andy Burnham tweeted this, we need to get these people out of our country, and said that he would get the Foreign Secretary and the Home Secretary to explore all options. Now, you can read that in one of two ways. Firstly, it was a very, very clear sign that he's sticking very hard to the rhetoric on migration that he used in Makerfield, which did help him, by all accounts, with some of the people who were otherwise naturally sympathetic to some of the reform arguments. But it also, I read it, cynic though I am, as a very strong message to the sort of people who are thinking about becoming his Foreign Secretary, his Home Secretary, his Attorney General. This isn't going to be the same kind of vibes that we've had from Keir Starmer and Richard Hermer, with much more respect for international law and human rights and the kind of classic more to the left agenda. It did feel like a very, very strong signal that he wants to hold a much harder line. I mean, closer to Shabana Mahmood, actually.
Well, and again, Burnham can essentially win the immigration debate by sticking to this fairness line. So he will, I imagine, find the idea of deporting people with indefinite leave to remain who have jobs here, who work in the NHS, say, who've been here for decades, gross, and he won't want that to happen. This specific case is a really good example of it's completely unfair for a grooming gangs leader to leave prison and then just be able to be living in the UK, and he should be deported back to Pakistan. And it's one of those litmus test cases where people think, yeah, I don't want this guy here. And I think that is what he can do really well. He's good at communicating, and he can make a really, really strong fairness case that people will basically agree with, and regardless of political party. If you'd like to keep up with the show, you can send us some fan mail or criticism. We actually really love getting these emails. Our account is intheroom@independent.co.uk. You can also watch us on YouTube. Our channel is In The Room Politics, and you can see all the best bits of the show on Instagram. Our handle is @intheroom.pod.
This podcast is part of the Independent Podcast Network and produced in association with Next Chapter Studios.
Our executive producer is Rod Ardehali.
And a special shout out to our content editor, Maya Ranushka, our video editor, Vali Raza, and our videographer, Dan Faber.
See you again.